Helen stopped the car in front of the house at dusk, as the pale November sunlight slanted through the skeletal trees. She turned off the engine and sat for a while. The car seat still held her warmth, but the air around her felt cold and metallic. From the glove compartment, Helen took out a ring of old keys the agent had given her, 5 in total, each stained with a dark red rust. Inside, the house breathed with the scent of damp and iron. Beneath the shrouds of white sheets, the furniture remained intact, as though the previous owner had only stepped out that morning. Helen wandered from room to room, lifting the cloths, wiping the dust from wooden frames. Every room had a mirror. Standing mirrors, wall mirrors, mirrors set into the ceiling. They were arranged in perfect symmetry, giving the sense of a ritual that had never ended. She told herself, "It's just decoration," but her heartbeat quickened each time she passed a glass surface. In every reflection, she saw herself, weary, gray hair unkempt, her face marked like an old scar refusing to heal. The house was larger than she'd imagined, each of her footsteps echoing as though someone else were walking behind her. Helen had brought a small box of paint, a few picture frames, a scented candle, little tokens of a new beginning. She placed a photograph of her son on the mantel. He was smiling, eyes bright and peaceful, unaware that his life would end in disappearance and silence. Helen didn't look long. She left the frame there, like a prayer too fragile to speak aloud. When night fell, she climbed the stairs to the second floor. The hallway stretched long, lined with doors slightly ajar, reflecting the glow of her lamp. With each step, she felt a presence close behind, but when she turned, only her shadow moved on the wall. The last room was the master bedroom. At its center stood a tall mirror, nearly touching the ceiling, draped in a thick white cloth. Helen took the edge of the sheet, hesitated for a few seconds, then pulled it down. A cloud of dust shimmered in the lamplight, scattering into 1,000 tiny sparks. In the mirror, she saw the room herself. And for a brief instant, another woman standing behind her, blurred and smokeless. She blinked. The figure was gone. Helen gave a soft laugh, muttered that she was tired, and turned away. But in the mirror, her reflection did not move. The next morning, weak sunlight filtered through the dusty curtains, casting a pale yellow streak across the mirror. Helen sat on the edge of the bed, a cup of cold coffee in her hand, her eyes unfocused on the reflection before her. Everything was the same. The bed, the dresser, the framed photograph of her son on the small table. But one detail made her pause. In the mirror, the photograph leaned slightly to the left, while in reality, it remained perfectly straight. She walked closer and adjusted the frame. In the mirror, her reflected hands didn't move in sync. Helen froze, her breath caught, heart pounding. It felt as though she were watching someone imitating her, clumsy, deliberate, wrong. She turned away, convincing herself it was just eye strain, a trick of the light. But throughout the day, as she cleaned, as she polished the mirrors, as she walked down the hallway, Helen began to notice other things. In the mirror on the ground floor, her reflection looked a few years younger. In the dining room mirror, her face appeared pale, lips moving silently as if whispering something she couldn't hear. And in the bathroom mirror, the stain on her hand looked darker, like old blood that had long since dried. By afternoon, the wind slipped through the cracks of the door, rustling the few remaining cloths still draped over the furniture. Between the sounds, Helen thought she heard breathing. She followed it to the living room, where 3 large mirrors stood facing one another, forming an endless corridor of Helen stretching into forever. She stared at the countless versions of herself fading, elongating into warped shadows. A wave of dizziness hit her. For a fleeting second, she saw another Helen. Trembling hands, soaked clothes, a face filled with despair, standing amid the reflections, unmoving. Its eyes were bloodshot, locked onto hers through the layered glass. Helen stumbled back, tripping over a chair. The screech of wood on floorboards grated like metal scraping metal. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing her breath steady. It's just imagination. Just reflection. The thought echoed in her head, though the voice didn't quite sound like her own. That night, Helen sat before the fireplace. The house was utterly still. The small flame flickered, mirrored in the glass across from her, but the woman in that mirror no longer moved in perfect rhythm. When Helen tilted her head, the reflection lagged by half a heartbeat. When she closed her eyes, it did not. Then came a faint click, the sound of a fingernail tapping gently against glass. Helen looked up sharply. The room was empty. But on the mirror's surface, a small handprint pressed from the inside, smudged and waiting, as though someone was ready to step through. That night, Helen couldn't sleep. The wind hissed through the cracks in the door, sounding like ragged breaths. The old house was full of noises, cracking walls, shifting floorboards, pipes that moaned. Yet beneath it all, she heard something distinct. Footsteps. Slow, measured, stopping just outside her bedroom door. When she opened it, the hallway was empty, lined only with mirrors that reflected the dim light, like the eyes of someone dying. Helen walked toward the large mirror at the end of the hall. Through a haze of condensation, she saw something that froze her heart. The reflection didn't match reality. Where there should have been a blank white wall, there was a dark room with a wet stone floor, and a small boy standing with his back to her. She mouthed the name, soundless. Eddie. The word tore through her mind like an old wound reopening. Eddie, her only son, gone 2 years now, lost on a stormy night. The police had found nothing but his soaked jacket near the lake behind the house. They said he might have slipped or run away. But Helen knew there was something else, something she had buried deep and never spoken of again. In the mirror, the boy turned around. His face was swallowed by shadow, only his eyes visible, wide, gleaming with a cold, metallic light. Helen lifted her trembling hand to the glass, and the room inside the mirror quivered. Other images flickered behind him, a dinner table overturned, a spilled bottle, herself screaming, the boy fleeing in tears. The memories surged all at once, crushing her chest. She stumbled back, gasping. Running downstairs, she grabbed a white sheet and threw it over the mirror. But as she bent down, the cloth slipped away, yanked from her grasp by something inside. A dull glow filled the house. One by one, the remaining sheets from every room slid silently to the floor. All the mirrors now stood bare, reflecting Helen, but each reflection was different. One Helen was crying. One was laughing, hysterical. One was cradling a body she couldn't quite see. Helen backed away, tears streaking her cheeks. A voice rose inside her head, not from her lips, but from the mouths of her other selves. You let him die. You know you did. She clamped her hands over her ears, but the sound reverberated through her bones, deep as a verdict. Rushing to the kitchen, she seized a hammer and smashed the nearest mirror. The glass exploded outward, yet instead of silence, the shatter became a chorus of screams echoing from every wall. fragments scattered across the floor. In each shard, Helen still saw herself, small, shaking, but one reflection looked directly back, its mouth moving. "Hide it! Hide it!" Helen collapsed to her knees, retching, her hands trembling uncontrollably. When she lifted her head, she saw a small figure slip past the dining room doorway. A barefoot boy, dripping wet, leaving a trail of water on the wooden floor, step by step, leading toward the cracked mirror at the end of the hall. Helen tried to call his name, but no sound came out, only the desperate movement of her lips. The boy didn't turn around. When she moved closer, he dissolved into smoke. Only the wet footprints remained, slowly fading, and from the darkness beyond the broken glass came another set of footsteps. Heavier. Dot. Walking out of the mirror. Helen jolted awake, her heart hammering. The footsteps hadn't stopped, slow, heavy, dragging across the wooden floorboards with deliberate weight. The house was bathed in the pale blue light of dawn, yet every mirror in the hallway reflected something else, a deep, blood-red glow like the lamps of a morgue. She backed toward the staircase, gripping the railing. On the wall beside her, her shadow turned the wrong way, its head twisting backward, grinning with a broken smile. Helen ran downstairs, her own footsteps merging with those echoing from the mirrors. She couldn't tell who was leading. The space around her began to distort. Each mirror no longer showed the room, but scenes warped by memory. She was screaming, pounding on a door in the rain. She was burying something in the wet ground. She was wiping blood from her hands, staring into a mirror and whispering, "Nothing happened." Helen stumbled and fell before a shattered mirror. Looking up, she saw dozens of versions of herself closing in, each with a different expression. Hatred, disgust, despair. They stood both inside and outside the glass, hazy as mist yet breathing, as though alive. As she crawled backward, one of them, younger, cleaner-faced, stepped fully out of the mirror. The younger Helen looked down at her, eyes cold and gleaming. No words came from her lips, yet a voice rang sharp and clear inside Helen's skull. "You remember now, don't you?" The room spun. The stormy night replayed before her eyes, the blinding anger, the shouting match with Eddie, the door slamming, the boy running into the wind, and her standing frozen, not following. The next morning, only the wet jacket. And then, the foolish decision. She had hidden her son's phone, erased the final messages, unwilling to let anyone know that the last argument had been her fault. Helen broke down sobbing. Her cries mingled with the twisted laughter of her other selves. One of them, face smeared with blood, stepped closer and cupped her cheek. The touch was cold enough to burn. "You want forgiveness," the voice hissed in her head, mocking. "There's nothing left to forgive." Helen staggered to her feet and ran for the front door. But it didn't lead outside. It opened into another corridor of mirrors, endless, suffocating, where thousands of Helens stood in rows like marionettes. With every step she took forward, they advanced in reverse, eyes locked on hers, their mouths moving in unison. "Kill her." Helen clutched her head, shaking, gasping. "No!" But the sound never left her throat. It trembled in the air like a trapped breath. Then everything fell silent, so still she could hear her heartbeat thudding inside her skull. From the center of the mirrored hall, one Helen stepped out. Not younger, not older, The same age, the same face, her. They faced each other, separated by a breath. The other Helen tilted her head, smiling faintly. In her eyes, Helen saw the reflection of a child standing far behind. Eddie, blurred like smoke. Helen's hand trembled as she reached out, pleading for the chance to touch her son. The reflection raised its own hand slowly, grasping Helen's wrist. The cold was paralyzing. Behind it, the mirror rippled like water, and dozens of hands began to emerge. Pale, searching, gripping her arms, her shoulders pulling her toward the glass. The sound of shattering filled the entire house, mingling with the wind's shrill laughter. In the final instant before the light consumed everything, Helen saw her own face in the mirror. Calm, silent, unafraid, just before both versions of her merged into one within a blinding white glow. The next morning, the house stood silent beneath a layer of fog thick as smoke. The front door was slightly ajar, and a soft breeze made the curtain by the window flutter as if the house itself were breathing. There were no sounds, no signs of life, only the musty scent of age and a fresh film of dust settling on the furniture. The real estate agent stopped by, intending to check on the property before listing it again. He opened the door, calling out a few times, but no one answered. Inside was strangely tidy. No suitcases, no trace of anyone having stayed. Only the old mirrors remained, their surfaces blank now, dulled like water under mist. He passed through the living room and paused before the wall where 3 large mirrors once hung. Now, only one remained, cracked slightly at the edge, its reflection blurred. Bending down, he picked up a small object from the floor, an empty picture frame. Oddly, in the mirror behind him, the reflection showed the frame holding a photo, a silver-haired woman smiling, her hand resting on a young boy's shoulder. Startled, he turned around. No one there. When he looked back, the image was still in the mirror, except now the woman's eyes were fixed directly on him, silent, as if guarding a secret. The house seemed to breathe softly with each of his steps. At times, he thought he heard faint footsteps from upstairs, but when he looked up, he saw only a thin ray of light gliding across the ceiling. Uneasy, he left quickly, leaving behind a short note. Condition good. Needs light cleaning. Wooden floors stable. Mirror intact. That afternoon, sunlight slanted through the window, striking the lone mirror that remained. On the glass, condensation began to form into delicate, trembling lines, like someone tracing from the other side. As the light faded, those lines joined together to form 2 simple words. I'm home. Inside the mirror, the dim space slowly brightened. Helen stood there, still, calm, her face more peaceful than ever. From the shadows behind her, Eddie stepped forward, placing his hand on his mother's shoulder. No more blame, no blood, no rage, only a gentle silence, like a dream finally closing. The firelight flickered behind them, reflected in the mirror, then went out. The room within darkened completely. In the real world, the mirror flared once, like a flash of lightning, and then was still. When night fell, only one faint sound echoed through the old walls, the soft crack of glass, then silence. And if someone were to pass by that house at midnight, they might see, through the dusty window, 2 figures sitting side by side, reflected in the single mirror left behind. As if they had never left at all. You are